The first 3 episodes of Ironheart came out last week, with the final 3 episodes scheduled to come out later today, and so far things have not been looking good for the latest Disney Plus Marvel show, not only amongst the audience reaction to it, but also in viewership figures as well. I'll get more on that in a moment, but first let's look at this article from That Park Place talking about how the audiences perceive Ironheart. Ironheart reactions are brutal. Rotten Tomatoes audience score plummets as trailer racks up massive dislike ratios and critic scores soar. After a flurry of early headlines accusing critics of review bombing, Ironheart has now entered a very different phase of audience reactions. The early Rotten Tomato audience scores continued to plummet, landing at just 56% as of this writing, well below the fresh threshold. Meanwhile, the critic score has actually increased, further widening the gap between the legacy media narrative and how real viewers feel. They include a screenshot where you can see it has an 85% for critics, 56% for audiences. I checked on it myself, and as of the time of recording, it's currently sitting at an 86% certified fresh for critics and a 55% for audiences. So it's shifted a little bit in both directions for the audience and critic score on this one. And like the article said, there's accusations of review bombing from audiences, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I made a video several days ago talking about it, but what really is that it's happening in both directions, because I was diving a little bit further into some of these scores, and you can see a lot of brand new accounts. They've only reviewed one thing, and that's Ironheart, giving it 5-star ratings. And there was also some out there giving it 1-star ratings from brand new accounts. But one thing I thought was kind of interesting is a lot of the low scores for Ironheart weren't necessarily brand new accounts. It was actually accounts that have a history of reviewing stuff on there. I mean, that was just kind of my quick look at it. I mean, you can check out my video talking about that if you want to know more information about it. But review bombing does happen from both directions, and more times than not, when it's something like this, it's really polarizing. The final result, or where the score ultimately lies, is kind of where the audience sentiment is, because it suggests that there's more people giving it bad scores than there's people giving it good scores. So it's safe to say that the audience sentiment towards Ironheart just isn't positive. When Ironheart launched, both critic and audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes hovered in the mid to low 60s. That parity didn't last long when the audience score has dropped to 56%. The critic score has quietly risen to 85%. This kind of divergence is becoming more common for Disney projects. Critics appear eager to give the benefit of the doubt to anything with a progressive bent or franchise legacy, while audiences judge the content on what it is, a piece of entertainment. And when it comes to Ironheart, the entertainment factor just isn't there for most. This is kind of another point of why I don't think it's review bombing, because generally this is how the scores work. Critics who are paid to give their reviews try to put them out there as early as possible. So usually within like the first several days, that's what the critic score is going to be, and that kind of stays around that area. There might be a little bit of a change as some of the late critics kind of put them on there, but generally that's how it is. The fact that it's actually ticked up over time suggests that more critics are trying to come there and make it a point to give a review for it that's a little bit more positive. Meanwhile, when it comes to review bombing and the mentality behind that, it's people doing it all at once upon the launch of something, because the accusation is they're not even watching it. They're just giving it a bad score. So you would see all those bad scores coming right at the start, but the fact of the matter that it's actually ticked down over time indicates that a lot of these more latter negative scores are not necessarily people just going there to give it a bad review, but people who actually gave the show a chance, watched it, didn't like it, and are giving it a bad review as a result. And from what I was personally able to see with like I said, with the people giving it negative scores, it wasn't people who just created accounts to give it a negative score, although some of those were there. It mostly seemed to be people who actually gave it a fair shot and didn't like it. And that's pretty much what the whole point of audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes is for people to actually view it and give their own opinion. And if it's a negative opinion, well, then it's a negative opinion. And if they disagree with critics, well, so be it, because we know critics have their own motives for why they would give something either a positive or a negative score outside of the entertainment factor. And people are going to try to say like, oh no, this is just a bunch of ists and phobes review bombing it. They don't want to watch anything with black women in it. And the funny thing about it is it really doesn't hold water even when it comes to Marvel properties, because just think about Ironheart. Her first appearance was in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and that was a movie that was starring pretty much black women, and you can see audience scores for this one was pretty high. So if the whole thing is like people are just ists and phobes and they just want to give it a bad rating for because it's a black woman starring it, well, it doesn't make sense when you look at other Marvel properties, because presumably Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, or even Black Panther would have experienced the same kind of racism or sexism or anything like that, but it just wasn't the case. So maybe it really is just the fact that Ironheart is not a good show. That probably could account for why the viewership for Ironheart is not great. We're hearing these numbers coming from Luminate, and while some people would say this is not necessarily an accurate metric to try to figure out what the viewership are, and I will admit that fully, because no one really knows what the viewership numbers are for Ironheart except for Disney, and I don't think Disney is going to release them. One thing, though, is after the first week, if the numbers are good for it, or if they are happy with the viewership, or if they can somehow spin it to be positive, then usually Disney tries to say something, and so far we haven't heard anything. Granted, it's only been a week, so maybe they're kind of spending some time gathering their figures or trying to figure out how to spin it, but if we don't hear anything within like another week or so, or even in like the first month, then that's usually a pretty strong indicator that the viewership numbers were pretty bad for it. But when it comes to Luminate and a lot of these other outlets that try to predict what the viewership figures are for it, usually Nielsen is kind of considered the gold standard, but it takes like about a month before you start getting the viewership numbers from that. Luminate, though, they still have their consistent methodology and how they actually gather viewership numbers. And according to their consistent methodology, for the first week that Ironheart was on Disney Plus, it didn't even chart, which is kind of a big thing for it, because the fact that it wasn't even able to chart and it had 3 episodes to actually play off of, because a lot of the metrics that they go by is just number of minutes viewed. Now, there's a lot of other shows on here that just had 1 episode that came out this last week, and those were able to chart. Like the number 10 on the streaming originals they have here is Mobland. They had 1 episode come out this last week, and that still was able to beat out 3 episodes of Ironheart as far as minutes viewed, which is a pretty strong indicator that people just aren't really watching Ironheart. Now, like I said, this is just how they personally measure it, but if the way they actually get their information and it's not even able to chart, that's a pretty strong indicator that the show is not good, because other Marvel shows that have actually done better, or were considered a flop, still did better than Ironheart, were at least able to chart at some point on the Luminate streaming originals. Other shows that we know were failures for them were not able to chart. So this really does mean that people just aren't watching the show, and the people who are watching the show, as we can see by the audience score kind of ticking down over time, just start liking this. So all in all, things are not looking good for Ironheart. Maybe it just kind of has a bad start, and the final 3 episodes will bring things around when those come out, but I'm really not expecting much. After the final 3 episodes, I'm sure there's a lot of people holding off their review, so I'm curious what these numbers will be a week from now after those final 3 episodes come out, whether or not it sticks the landing and it actually ticks up a little bit, or whether or not the people who are kind of holding off on that are also going to hate it and it's going to kind of go down. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think when the final 3 episodes of Ironheart are coming out, people are going to like it, or do you think they're going to hate it? Because right now, Disney releasing it just before Fantastic Four suggests that they kind of want it to be forgotten about really quickly. So it really does feel like Disney doesn't have any confidence in this. So if the audience score does go down and it turns out that this is just a massive flop for them, I would not be surprised. But I'm curious what you have to say about it. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.